Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I was born and raised on the streets of Detroit and roamed the streets full of joy and went to the University of Michigan in 1960 and came to Lawrenceville in 1968. There was no shortage of characters on campus. This is, of course, long before coeducation. And I think I would say that back then, people tended to work harder at creating a personality to accompany them through the school. Students in lower school, particularly in the old lower school, were very, very tribal beings. They were living in a very different world than the circle. Let me shuffle through the deck for a second and see if I can come up with a lower school story. There are lots of them. There was a perfectly wonderful boy in Old Thomas House who believed that his cube, the little cubicle in which he lived, was haunted. And he talked about it for a long time. And I would talk about it with him. But strangely enough, a couple of times, much to his amazement, he would come back to his cube and discover that it was on fire. So we had to try to figure out how to solve that problem. So there would always be things like that going on. One wonderful boy, Willie Euler, in Old Thomas House, had a huge parrot in his cube. This is before pets, before radios, before anything. I don't remember quite how we arranged to have a huge parrot in his cube, but it used to scream and carry on and yell at people and wake people up in the morning. And it never bothered him, it just bothered everybody else. I think that I'm increasingly appreciative of the people that I've known for a long, long time, and that they really form a core of my experience at the school. Henry Woods was in the English department when I first arrived, and I was good friends with him for years and years and years. And I learned a great deal from him and enjoyed his company enormously. We used to fly around in his airplane. We used to go shop for wine. We used to talk about fishing, those things. You haven't asked me anything about the 27 years that I spent in the martial arts at Lawrenceville, but I would say that was really an important use of my time. The students needed an advisor for their martial arts club. I had to be there. The kids couldn't have the club. So I went there. And then I said to myself, well, if I'm going to be here, I might as well be in the class. So I was in the back, way in the back row of the class. And the kids, which was a really rich experience, really, really, really took care of me and looked out for me. And I eventually worked my way to the front of the class and eventually became a black belt and eventually I went to instructor school and eventually became an instructor and, and on and on and on. So it was a very, very positive opportunity for me. There's no neurotic drive to continue at the moment, anyway. I suppose I could study another art form. I think it would be interesting to disappear into the Iga Mountains of Japan and at my age and come out a few years later appear out of the mountains a few years later. That interests me. The reason that I want to leave the school is so that I have some time to do some other things, which would, for me, would include doing some work with some conservation organizations that I don't really have a chance to work with. I'm very interested in freshwater conservation. I think it's an important environmental indicator of where we are. If a trout can live in the stream, we have some chance of surviving around that stream. Also, I have a book of short stories that I would really like to finish, and it's not compatible with being at Lawrenceville to really have the time to put into that kind of writing. So I think it's important to do some of those things that I'd like to do. So hence retirement.